The last rays of sunlight were melting into the horizon when the rooftop garden of Studio A at the JTBC Eielson Production Center transformed into something resembling a quiet movie set. The production crew had spent the entire day shooting scenes for a spring-themed commercial film featuring Yoona, Junho, and the fast-rising actor Chaemin. The rooftop was decorated with a long white floral walkway bordered by soft LED lanterns designed to imitate the warm glow of late April evenings. The petals of artificial white camellias scattered lightly across the path caught the amber light of sunset, creating a surreal blend of nature and studio precision. There was a kind of hush in the air that settled once the crew began packing equipment after the last group scene. Far below, the faint hum of traffic in Eielson flowed like a river of sound. But up here everything felt suspended, gentle, strangely intimate. Yoona stood at the far end of the floral path, waiting for the photographer to adjust the lens for the final promotional stills. The sky behind her shifted from orange to violet, and the soft breeze lifted strands of her hair in a way that looked almost scripted. She wore a cream-toned spring dress paired with a light shawl that framed her shoulders. And even in the dimming light, the delicate shimmer of the fabric reflected the rooftop lanterns. Junho was a few steps away, finishing a brief conversation with the sound technician who was adjusting the mic pack clip under the lapel of his pastel beige blazer. There had been a long day of filming, group scenes, solo cuts, slow-motion walking shots, product close-ups, and yet, even near the end, Junho still carried that unmistakable calm, almost protective energy whenever he shared the frame with Yoona. Chaemin, being younger and scheduled for a separate segment that didn't require him for the final stills, had already gone downstairs to the second-floor wardrobe area to switch outfits for his next shoot. As he disappeared into the stairwell, a quiet transition came over the rooftop. Most staff drifted toward the far edge of the garden to rearrange equipment for the morning shoot, leaving Yoona and Junho temporarily unsupervised, not intentionally, but as a natural result of the timing. What began as a routine shift in crew positions led to an unplanned moment of stillness where only two people remained at the center of a meticulously built set that suddenly felt more like a private sanctuary than a production location. The camera operator, who had been reviewing settings on his monitor, briefly stepped back to retrieve a new filter. In that accidental gap, just a minute and a half, no more, the rooftop garden turned into an entirely different stage. Yoona, looking down to check the hem of her dress, noticed that a corner of the thin fabric had snagged lightly on one of the stands supporting the LED lanterns. She reached down to untangle it, but before she could move, Junho stepped toward her with the kind of instinctive quickness that comes from familiarity rather than obligation. He didn't make a big gesture, he simply lowered himself, reached a hand toward the snagged fabric, and quietly said something that made Yoona pause and look at him with a soft, almost surprised expression. That moment, those first few seconds of closeness, became the foundation of the clip that would soon take over the internet. But the truth is, the moment lasted longer than those 11 seconds the public eventually saw. The light from the sunset reflected off Junho's blazer, giving him a halo-like outline while Yoona, half bent and half smiling, let out a tiny breath of laughter. It wasn't the dramatic kind you see in scripted scenes, but the quiet, involuntary type, the kind that escapes when the heart is caught off guard. As Junho gently freed the hem of her dress, Yoona straightened and instinctively brushed hair away from her face. A single white camellia petal, blown by the wind or loosened from the decorative arrangement, settled on her hair near her temple. Junho noticed it before she did, without hesitation, and with a tenderness that appeared far too natural for an on-screen partner. He reached out and swept the small petal away with the back of his fingers. It was just a second-long gesture. It carried an intimacy that language couldn't adequately describe. Yoona blinked, momentarily startled, then smiled in that way that made her eyes soften rather than widen, subtle, warm, almost shy. From the far end of the rooftop, the camera operator returned, lifting his camcorder as a reflex. He wasn't trying to capture anything unusual, just behind-the-scenes footage for promotional snippets. But when he zoomed in and saw Yoona and Junho standing close, exchanging looks that didn't match the usual professionalism of co-stars at work, he hesitated. Not because it was forbidden, but because what he saw through the lens felt strangely like stepping into a private moment. In the video that would later ignite the internet, Yoona and Junho stood just inches apart, the sky glowing behind them. Junho said something inaudible, and Yoona responded by tilting her head to the side, letting out a small giggle as she touched his arm, lightly. Lightly that it could have been interpreted as a friendly gesture. But viewers around the world would later insist it carried deeper meaning. The footage showed them in silhouette against the burning last light of sunset. A composition so beautiful it seemed staged. Yet it wasn't. It was real. Spontaneous, naturally timed. The clip ended as the photographer called out for the two to move into position for the official stills. They stepped apart. The lingering softness on their faces remained, creating the illusion of a romantic drama scene fading into credits. The camera operator didn't think much of it at the time. The day continued. The shoot moved on. Rooftop returned to the usual controlled chaos of a production set. However, late that evening, as staff shared files internally, the 11-second behind-the-scenes clip made its unintentional way to a fan-run international account. The account posted it at 10:23 p.m. Korea Standard Time with the caption, "This chemistry is not acting." Within minutes, the clip began spreading across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram Reels, and international fan communities. By midnight, the hashtag Yoona Junho Rooftop had already surpassed 100,000 mentions. Fan edits appeared almost instantly, slow-motion cuts, romantic filters, background music overlays of soft piano melodies. Around the world began analyzing every frame, the angle of Yoona's smile, the exact second Junho noticed a petal, the subtle tilt of his shoulders as he stepped closer. Korean fans shared commentary claiming they had never seen Junho look at anyone the way he looked at Yoona in those seconds. International fans drew parallels to classic K-drama moments, calling the incident a real-life drama unfolding without a script. What made the reaction even more intense was the timing. For weeks, online forums and entertainment communities had been buzzing with discussions about a potential love triangle narrative involving Yoona, Junho, and Chaemin, sparked by nothing more than playful interactions during promotional appearances. But the release of the Rooftop clip shifted the entire conversation. Overnight, speculation about Chaemin's involvement dropped by nearly 80%. People weren't talking about a triangle anymore. They were talking about two people, two established stars whose chemistry had long been admired but never fully captured in such quiet, unscripted authenticity. And letters, reaction threads, and comment sections filled with lines such as, "This feels too natural to ignore," and "You don't look at someone like that unless there's something real." One TikTok video featuring the clip with a slowed soundtrack reached over 3 million views in less than 12 hours. Fans from the Philippines, Vietnam, Japan, and the United States created emotional edits, drawing comparisons to classic romantic films. The public sentiment wasn't merely excitement, it was a kind of collective longing. The feeling that people were witnessing a glimpse of something genuine. Korean entertainment reporters, who had spent the past month following rumors about Chaemin's supposed admiration for Yoona, suddenly found themselves rewriting headlines. Articles began describing the Rooftop moment as the unintentional spark that reignited the Yoona-Junho love narrative. Analysts pointed out that the simplicity of the moment made it powerful. No scripted lines, no promotional posing. Two people standing together in fading light, where that the world would soon dissect their every expression. And staff members who had been on set that day couldn't help but acknowledge the effect. A lighting assistant posted on a private account, later screenshotted and shared by fans, saying, "I've seen many co-stars interact on set. The atmosphere between those two when the sun was setting, there was something different." Another comment claimed, "They glow together in a way that's impossible to produce artificially." As the night deepened and the online discussion expanded, and communities began piecing together past sightings and subtle interactions from awards ceremonies, interviews, and past collaborative projects, the Rooftop clip became the centerpiece, the catalyst that transformed scattered observations into narrative. Suddenly, people weren't just watching, they were believing. By sunrise the next morning, it was clear that the Rooftop moment had become more than a behind-the-scenes clip. It had become a story the public was not only consuming but emotionally participating in. The love triangle rumor that had included Chaemin melted away, shadowed by something far more compelling, the possibility that Yoona and Junho shared a connection that had silently grown behind the public eye, visible only through fleeting, scripted moments like the one captured on that rooftop. And as the world continued to replay those 11 seconds, the question quietly lingered. Was it merely a coincidence of timing and lighting? Had the camera captured something neither Yoona nor Junho intended to reveal? The answer remains suspended, like the final drop of sunlight over Ilson. Fans waiting for what might unfold next. World awoke to a digital storm. What had begun as an 11-second rooftop clip quietly released at 10:23 p.m. had spiraled into a global conversation by sunrise. Fan accounts, entertainment outlets, even mainstream news platforms ran headlines questioning the true nature of the moment between Yoona and Junho. What made the situation more fascinating was how effortlessly the narrative shifted away from the once persistent buzz about Chaemin's admiration for Yoona. It wasn't that Chaemin had done anything wrong, in fact. He had barely played a role in the rooftop moment at all. Instead, the public gaze had been magnetically pulled back to Yoona and Junho, as if the universe had subtly tilted to realign attention where it belonged. Their connection, forged years before this commercial filming session, resurfaced with quiet force. The conversation didn't stay confined to fans dissecting body language or analyzing silhouettes. Within hours, commentators began revisiting moments from years prior, awards ceremonies, interviews, backstage cuts, projects, realizing that the rooftop scene was not an anomaly but rather an echo of something that had been visible to attentive eyes for a long time. One compilation video, posted by a fan from Thailand, juxtaposed the rooftop clip with a moment from a 2019 charity gala at Coke's Convention Center. That night, Yoona had attended wearing a white ivory evening dress embroidered with tiny crystal beads that shimmered under the golden ballroom lights. Junho, attending as part of a musical performance ensemble, had worn a classic black suit with a satin lapel. In the grainy footage, a brief scene captured Yoona adjusting her clutch while Junho politely stepped aside to let her pass through a crowd. Their eyes met for only half a second. Yet the fan captioned the clip, "It started before we even realized." While such captions were romantic exaggerations, they tap into a sentiment that felt increasingly difficult to dismiss. Their awards show interactions over the years, subtle smiles at the Asia Artist Awards, brief shared glances at SBS Entertainment Night. Junho once leaned slightly forward when Yoona spoke on stage, were suddenly reinterpreted through the lens of the rooftop moment. What had once seemed like friendly professionalism now glowed with a possible deeper undertone. Observers began describing how Yoona's laughter always softened when she responded to Junho, how his posture changed when she appeared nearby. Ambient energy between them seemed to shift even in crowded settings. Then came the resurfaced anecdotes from staff members who had worked with them on past projects. A stylist who had assisted during a promotional shoot in Bukshinhanok village 2 years earlier described the pair as effortlessly in sync, according to her. Spent a break rehearsing a short scene together in a narrow alley lined with traditional wooden homes. The evening sun had been sinking behind the curved roofs, painting the street in gold. They were running lines, she recalled in a private social media post that fans quickly circulated. But halfway through, they didn't feel like coworkers anymore. Just looked natural, as if the scene didn't require acting at all. Although she didn't name them directly, the timing and context made it clear who they were. The deeper fans dug, the more patterns they uncovered. At an outdoor shoot along Mangwon Riverside Park during a spring event the previous year, Yoona, dressed in a thin chiffon blouse, visibly shivered during a cold breeze. Many celebrities simply endure such discomfort to maintain continuity for filming. But Junho, who had been adjusting props nearby, noticed immediately. Without calling attention to it, he walked up, flipped off his light jacket, and draped it around her shoulders before stepping back with quiet nonchalance. Cameras weren't focused on them at the time, but a bystander's phone captured the interaction in a blurred clip. Fans had seen it before, of course. Once the rooftop video resurfaced, the jacket moment took on new meaning. Some viewers claimed the gesture showed instinct rather than courtesy, the kind of natural attentiveness one shows to someone they genuinely care for. Online discussions turned into full-scale analysis threads. Articles began exploring body language theory, pointing out how Junho often unconsciously angled his body toward Yoona when standing beside her, or how Yoona's shoulders relaxed whenever she was near him. Had a signature gesture, pulling her left sleeve or tucking a strand of hair, that she tended to do only when she felt flustered or shy. Fans documented how often that gesture appeared in moments involving Junho. One thread titled "Her Left Sleeve Stutter, The Junho Effect," gained over 50,000 upvotes in a day. The entertainment industry, meanwhile, cautiously observant. Agencies did not address the speculation, perhaps understanding that official statements often amplify rumors rather than quelling them. But insiders, speaking anonymously, provided comments that only added fuel to the fire. Production assistant from JTBC Ilson Studio mentioned that the atmosphere between Yoona and Junho during filming was different from the usual co-star chemistry. Insisted there was nothing unprofessional, only a certain softness, an ease that felt intimate but unspoken. The operator shared that the rooftop moment felt instinctive, not staged, emphasizing that he had captured hundreds of behind-the-scenes interactions in his career. Yet few carried the quiet resonance that this one did. Insider whispers bolstered the narrative. It was the public who truly shaped its emotional impact. People yearned for a story that felt genuine, something tender, unscripted, and quietly hopeful. The world had grown accustomed to polished press releases and calculated media appearances. But witnessing Yoona and Junho in a moment unguarded, unaware, bathed in warm sunset light, felt like stumbling upon a secret written in the language of glances and gestures. This was the essence that fans held on to. Belief that love, in its purest form, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just lingers softly in the air, waiting to be recognized. Chaemin, despite being part of the same promotional campaign, gradually faded from the center of discussions. In truth, he had never been the focal point. His involvement in the so-called love triangle had been more of a playful fan-generated narrative than a real-life possibility. The actor admired Yoona professionally, as many did, and his interactions with her during shooting were polite, respectful, and appropriately distant. Observers noted that he consistently maintained a deferential attitude, often addressing her formally and stepping aside during group arrangements without hesitation. Once the rooftop clip emerged, even fans who had entertained the triangle theory admitted that his role was more symbolic than literal. He represented the possibility of rivalry, a catalyst that made the public consider different dynamics, but ultimately, his presence only emphasized how strong the connection between Yoona and Junho appeared by comparison. This wasn't a story about three people. It was a story about two people who stood in the glow of a sunset long enough for the world to pause and look closer. Entertainment analysts chimed in with their own interpretations. Some highlighted the way public sentiment often gravitates toward relationships that feel organic, especially when they blossom naturally over years of professional intersection and subtle interaction. Others suggested that Yoona and Junho embodied a narrative archetype that audiences instinctively respond to, the pairing of two charismatic, mature figures whose chemistry balances elegance with emotional depth. Their personalities, though different, create an appealing harmony. Yoona's gentle charm meets Junho's grounded, quietly intense presence. When they stand together, an equilibrium that feels instinctively right. Speculation expanded beyond romantic possibility and into the cultural phenomenon of shared energy. Korean media has long documented how certain pairs generate heightened public interest simply by appearing together. Yoona and Junho. This energy appeared consistently across events, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage. Even when not interacting directly, there was a sensory shift whenever they entered the same frame. Viewers described it as magnetic synchronicity, a pull that wasn't forced or calculated but simply existed. Discussions deepened. People revisited the rooftop clip again and again. They noticed how naturally Junho stepped toward Yoona when he saw the petal in her hair, as if moving toward her was an unconscious response. They observed how Yoona's laughter didn't burst exuberantly but softened quietly, the kind reserved for genuine comfort and fondness. Photographer called them back to position for the stills. The way they parted carried the lingering warmth of a moment not yet finished. These were the elements that made the entire scene feel like a glimpse into a chapter of a story still unfolding. Companies remained silent. Silence sometimes speaks louder than words. Denials, no clarifications, no attempts to redirect attention. This absence of response allowed the public imagination to flourish. Entertainment agencies are well aware that rumors can affect image, and yet neither side took steps to dampen the speculation. Fans interpreted this as tacit acceptance or, at the very least, acknowledgement that there was nothing harmful to correct. Vacuum of official commentary. The rooftop moment grew into a symbolic representation of something beautiful and possibly real. And so, the narrative evolved from a fleeting clip to collective belief. People didn't simply think that Yoona and Junho looked good together, they felt that their interactions carried authenticity. Their history, with its small gestures, quiet camaraderie, of overlapping paths, wove a tapestry that made the rooftop moment feel inevitable rather than surprising. It was as if the world had been waiting for this spark, even if neither of them intended it. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of the story is how the public chose to interpret it, not through scandal, but through yearning. In a digital landscape often dominated by controversy, the reaction to Yoona and Junho was tender, hopeful, almost protective. Fans spoke not of invasion but of admiration, celebrated the beauty of an unguarded moment between two people who seemed, even if just briefly, to exist in a world of their own. This is why the rooftop clip transcended its original context. It didn't matter that it lasted only 11 seconds or that it was captured accidentally. It was the feeling it evoked, the stillness, the warmth, the almost confession suspended in the fading light over Ilson, that resonated deeply. The scene became a metaphor. Reminder that love doesn't always require grand declarations. Sometimes it reveals itself in the simplest gestures, a hand brushing away a petal, a shared smile, an instinctive step closer. Days passed and the clip continued to spread. Discussions shifted toward what this moment meant for both stars. For Yoona, known for her elegance and emotional grace, the moment highlighted her capacity for warmth beyond her on-screen persona. For Junho, admired for his discipline and intensity, he showcased a tenderness that often remained hidden behind the roles he played. Together, they created an impression of balance, two individuals whose energies meshed naturally, as though the universe had conspired to align them just long enough for the world to see it. And in the end, perhaps that is why the public embraced this narrative so wholeheartedly. Not because they expected an announcement or a confirmation, but because the possibility of a quiet connection between two beloved figures offered a kind of comfort, a romantic idealism that felt refreshing in a world that often moves too quickly. Maybe love does not appear in dramatic plot twists or bold declarations. Maybe it shows itself in fleeting glances, shared laughter, and gestures so gentle they would be missed if not for the golden hour sun casting them into relief. On that rooftop garden at JTBC Ilson, love, whether real or imagined by the viewers, felt momentarily tangible. A glow captured not by intention, pure chance. And so the world held on to that moment, replaying it again and again. Not because it demanded answers, but because it felt like watching the first spark of a story viewers deeply wanted to believe. As long as Yoona and Junho remained silently intertwined in the public imagination, that rooftop sunset will continue to live on, not as a rumor, but as a memory of what love can sometimes look like when it isn't trying to be seen.